Some people are obsessed with the idea of extraterrestrial threat, alien invasion and something like that. Alien had been a somewhat popular topic in media, and to some extent, scientific community. What can I say? Alien threat is real. Zoologists have been combating this threat since at least the last century. But the thing is, it did not come from the outer space. So, let me bring up the question. What exactly is invasive alien species? Invasive alien species is technically a layered concept. First, let's talk about alien species. Alien species is a species living outside their natural distribution range. It's also commonly called introduced species. Some call them exotic species. Now, some of the alien species are invasive, hence the specific term, invasive alien species. Invasive alien species is an alien species that inflicts damages, usually ecological. For example, they cause the decline or even the extinction of native species population. Some can even outright damage the environment. The damage can also be economical if they damage properties, especially agricultural properties. Some can also damage livelihood to some extent. For example, those that causes disease could be as a direct cause or as a vector. There is no real threshold to how much damage they need to inflict to be categorized as invasive. But if someone called a species invasive, it usually means the damage is quite significant. So, how can a species become invasive? There are several ways for that. The first and the most straightforward way is they simply outcompete the native species in the same niche. This can be caused by different things. For example, they can breed faster and/or they grow faster, so they dominate by quantity. They can simply have more appetite, so they eat more than the native species and consume most of the resources. They can be better at getting resources, so they get said resources faster and dominate the competition. The second way, they could eradicate the native competitor. For example, some monitor lizards use similar resources to crocodiles. But monitor lizards also eat crocodile eggs, so they also lower the crocodile population. The third way, they fill an open niche. For example, in an island where no predator exists, an introduction of predator can disrupt the balance significantly, especially because the native species are not adapted to avoid predators. An open niche could also mean they don't have any competition. In some cases, they don't even have any predators, so nothing controls them except for the carrying capacity of the habitat. The fourth way, they have traits that the native species cannot overcome. For example, if you introduce poisonous animal to a habitat with little to no poisonous animal, a lot of predators will die because they aren't adapted to overcome or avoid poisonous prey. The fifth way, they physically modify the habitat. For example, invasive deer can trample vegetation and damage trees, so they indirectly cause the decline of several species by habitat destruction. The sixth way, they hybridize with the native species. While you can argue they don't really damage the ecosystem at surface level, at the genetic level, they lower the native gene pool. At a certain degree, they can lead to the decline of native species population, and even extinction, because the original species changed into something different. The seventh way, which is more stochastic than the rest, they are better at adapting to new conditions. For example, if you live in a forest, then suddenly the forest got burned down, native population might perish, but introduced species that can adapt will in turn fill the habitat. Now, why are they here? Where did they come from? And how did they end up here? The answer is case by case, but almost every single one is facilitated by none other than human. The method of introduction can be intentional or unintentional. Intentionally, they can be introduced for consumption, to be hunted as trophy animal, as a biological control to combat pests, or ironically, to combat other invasive species, or simply as an ornamental animal, that is, to make the area more beautiful or cool. Unintentionally, they can be transported by humans as a hitchhiker. Some accidentally became a stowaway on a ship, some even aircrafts during war. Some live on imported plants, etc. The case of pet animals can be both intentional and unintentional. Pets are intentionally brought to be kept as, well, pets. Some pets can escape, so that's the unintentional part. But some people can intentionally release pets to the wild because they could not or did not want to keep them anymore. Keep in mind, while it is called invasive alien species, it is not a trait for the species. It's actually a trait for the specific population. For example, let's say Boiga irregularis, the brown tree snake. The brown tree snake is invasive in Guam. Guam does not have many predators. The only natural predator there is the Mariana monitor. Feral pigs could also become a predator to some extent. And so, the introduction of the brown tree snake to this habitat disrupted the usual balance, because it's an additional apex predator. That's significant. And so, it became invasive in Guam. If it is introduced to other habitats that already have a lot of predators, then they might not be invasive over there, but they will still be considered alien species. For the one in natural habitat, they are just plain brown tree snake, not even an alien species. So yes, to emphasize what I've said, it is not a trait for the species, it's for the specific population. Now, let's talk about some of the famous and interesting cases of invasive alien species. But before that, first, let's talk about the grey squirrel invasion to the UK. The grey squirrels are native to North America. They were first introduced to Britain around 1876 by the 11th Duke of Bedford, Herbrand Russell. Grey squirrels were released in estates and parks. The reason was simply because animal is cool, or cute, or whatever. It's not like the UK did not have any squirrels. They got the red squirrels. So why would they need grey squirrels? Well, they don't need the grey squirrel. It was simply more animal is better. At least some people that likes animal thought so. Some people might have the same thought nowadays, but unfortunately, that thought is most of the time faulty. The grey squirrel outcompetes the red squirrel. They are bigger, they eat more, they breed faster, and they even carry disease that eradicate the red squirrel. In some areas, grey squirrels even completely replaced the native red squirrels. Shakespeare left a lasting impression to some people for centuries even after his death. One of that influence might be the introduction of the European starling to North America. The European starling was imported to the US back in 1890 by Eugene Schieffelin. He released around 60 individuals because, allegedly, he wanted to bring every bird mentioned in Shakespeare's work to the US. Again, allegedly, because this is actually not confirmed. Regardless, Schieffelin is a member of the American Acclimatization Society, which is a group dedicated to introducing European flora and fauna to North America. In the previous topic, we talked about how the idea of the more the merrier can be bad, and it is indeed. European starling had grown to hundreds million of individuals in the US. They don't really do anything special. Their lifestyle is basically the same as other songbirds, but the sheer number of their flocks can cause damages, even airplane hazards because they flock at plane runways. Australia colonization began in 1788. The first fleet brought rabbits for food. Oh, just to be clear, there were no rabbits in Australia. Anyway, colonization was going on for decades. At some point, they were like, new land is great, but it's not like our homeland. So they brought red foxes, because hunting foxes is a traditional English sport. Not satisfied, they brought even more rabbits, because, hunting rabbits is also a UK thing. Oh, fun fact, These rabbits are not even a native animal in the UK. They were also introduced to the UK. Anyway, rabbit breeds fast. That's why they proliferate fast in Australia. As depicted in popular media, red fox naturally hunts rabbit. So with the increasing number of rabbits in Australia, foxes also increase. Nowadays, there are millions of rabbits and foxes in Australia, especially on the southern edge. The problem is, while Australia is famous for dangerous animals, the only big mammalian carnivore there is the dingo. Well, you could maybe argue there is Tasmanian devils too. Still, the red foxes do not have any predator, while the rabbits just outbreed the mortality rate. If I ask you where can you find camels, most of you would probably answer Northern Africa and the Middle East. Some might also answer Middle Asia. But many people probably didn't know Australia have 1 million camels. But look at the map. How did they even arrive in Australia? The answer is human. But why though? Well, you know what Australian land mostly is? It's desert. Well, technically, no. But basically it is. Middle Australia is very arid. Back then, the British Empire was one of the biggest empires in history. Or maybe it is. So they were like, yo, how about we min-max this exploration? Let's just bring camel to explore the desert. And so they did, because they can. The first batch of camels arrived in 1840. Several were imported, but only one survived the voyage. It was named Harry, and used by the explorer John Ainsworth Horrocks. He was known as the man who was shot by his own camel, because in 1846, during expedition, while he was loading his gun, Harry the camel kneeled, causing the gun to accidentally fire. Horrocks was furious, and he requested Harry the camel to be shot. And Harry was shot, and Horrocks died from the wound. The government was like, damn, that's unfortunate. Let's do it again. So they imported yet another batch of camels in 1860. But this time they thought, what if we also imported their native riders? And so they brought in cameliers. This time, the camels were effective, and the group was known as the Afghan camelier. Thousands of camels were imported between 1870 to 1900, alongside their rider, by the way. Between 1920 and 1930, motorized transportations were introduced to Australia. Camels and cameliers were not needed anymore, so the cameliers left, without their camels. The camels were just released in the Australian desert. If you are wondering why they are considered invasive, they eat plants that are considered rare and threatened. They also trample vegetations and compete with the native herbivores, which are generally smaller than them. If you think we've already talked too much about Australia, then unfortunately, there is more. Just one last thing, I promise. So, when the first fleet came to Australia, they also brought sugarcane. Sugarcane farming in Australia was a decent success, so they brought more. There is a problem though. The larvae of a native beetle loves to eat the roots of sugarcane. In other places, pest problem of sugarcane plantations can be successfully controlled by marine toad. It was called Bufo marinus. Nowadays, it's recognized as Rhinella marina. Anyway, because of this, the toad is also known as the cane toad. And so, they were brought to Australia as a biological control. Cane toad breeds fast, and they successfully breed in Australia. And fast. So the colonials were like, ah, nice. No, we don't need to purposefully breed them. And so they were hopeful. Unfortunately, they don't have a significant impact on the Australian cane beetles. Cane toad basically eats everything that they can swallow, so they don't specifically target cane beetles. With how fast they breed, they spread fast, and then they became a problem. They outcompete native amphibians because of how voracious they are. They eat small creatures, including lizards, which Australia have many. Just by living their life, they threaten the decline of various species in Australia. But not only that. You see, Australia is famous for their various venomous animals. What they are lacking is poisonous animal, at least inland. Cane toad has a potent toxin. Not only the adults, even their tadpoles are highly toxic. If you are wondering how potent the toxin is, even adult dogs can die after eating a cane toad. Usually, the smaller the animal, the easier it is to be killed by a toxin of similar dose. And so, snakes and monitor lizards, which are the abundant predators in Australia, will also die when eating a cane toad. As time goes by, several predators have learned to avoid cane toad. But that by itself is also a problem. That means cane toad will not be threatened by predators. They can proliferate freely and spread even wider. And so, cane toad become a multi-layered threat in Australia, even to this day. Have you ever thought, or at least heard the sentiment that the trope of alien invading USA is too common? The Earth is big. Why always USA? Well, the simple answer to that is because that's where alien is considered to be interesting. Scriptwriters write the USA as the setting because that's where the market is. Filmmakers use the USA as the setting because usually they are from the USA, so it's easier to film in their own country. Again, because that's where alien is considered to be interesting. Some alien enthusiasts can be found in other countries, of course, but most of them either don't have the time or don't have the budget to be invested in alien stuffs. And that's basically the same with the terrestrial alien species, especially those that originally be kept as pets. People that keep exotic pets are usually from the first world countries, because, first, they are the ones that have the budget to do so, and second, the supposedly exotic animals are simply not exotic in third world countries, because it's native there. That's why a lot of invasive alien species that was originally kept as pets usually happen in first world countries, including the USA. The thing is, most region in the USA is not really suitable for these exotic animals, but there is a state that do. Florida. Florida is a mix of subtropical and tropical region. It has different kinds of habitats, including coastal, forests, prairies, scrubs, and wetlands, which is why it can provide sufficient niche and carrying capacity for various exotic animals, even those that are considerably big, like the wild hogs, Nile monitor, pythons, and possibly even Nile crocodiles. Cane toads that I previously talked about are also there, not native. Invasive. With how much invasive species there is, Florida seems like an open world zoo. One of the worst, if not the worst invasive species, is domestic cat. The thumbnail is not just a random clickbait, you know. There are tons of cat lovers in the world. Many people want to keep cat as pets, and so, cat became really popular. Cat might even be the most widespread species of animal, aside from human. The thing is, cat likes to hunt. It's their instinct. Cats have been the #1 cause of bird deaths in several countries, if not all. The damage increases significantly when cats are introduced to islands with no big predators. They could straight up cause the extinction of some species. The Lyell's wren became extinct within 2 years of cat introduction. What makes cats so successful is not just their cunning and agile nature. It's also because they are so beloved by humans. Humans feed them. Humans protect them, even from other humans. Humans intentionally breed them. Well, some resulted in a not so advantageous character to live in the wild, but at least their number keep increasing. Cats have been living with humans for quite a long time, which is why it's very difficult to separate us. That's why we regulate them. Some government might demand owners to always keep their cat inside. Some governments or even communities are active in spaying cats so they don't overpopulate. They don't hate cats, or at least that's not the root of their action. They are just trying to keep the nature in balance. So try to understand. I've talked about how we control cats' overpopulation, but what about other invasive alien species? Well, the efforts and methods vary. The most straightforward method is to straight up hunt them, gun them down, literally. Some government may issue hunting decree for invasive species. In some countries, invasive species are free to be hunted by anyone for basically whatever purposes. Some government might place traps to capture and eradicate invasive species. Some try the biological route by introducing biological controls to combat them. Keep in mind though, this can backfire, just like the cane toad situation in Australia. Some can deploy more advanced tactics, for example, using chemicals or even disease that is specifically lethal to the invasive species. This of course should be studied and considered deeper, because if it's not obvious enough, it could create an even bigger damage to the environment if it's not specific. Even though many efforts had been made to combat invasive species, most of them are still a problem to this day. It's not like the effort is ineffective. Some definitely did reduce the population significantly, but it's an ongoing process that might not even have an end. Still, humans are the one that introduced them in the first place, which is why we are trying to take responsibility for our own action. The most effective method to combat invasive alien species is simply to not introduce alien species, which is why people are trying to educate others about the danger of invasive alien species, including me, to some extent. But that's the end of this video. For now, let's just learn what is known. Maybe spread the awareness and educate others too. And that's all for now. By the way, if you are wondering, are humans technically invasive alien species too? The answer is, if you think so, then yes, we check all the requirements after all. Anyway, enjoy your day.